We got Kangaroo Jack. We got Kangaroo Jack. Nigga, this pet kangaroo fatally attacked its owner. I wonder if he beat him up or he clawed him up. Cause if you get beat up by a motherfucking animal like he a human, oh man, you cannot get a redo. And you shouldn't even be able to get you should be in your soul should be in jail. Your soul should be in jail for 10 years if you get beat up by an animal like you while it's on its while it's on its 2 feet like a human. You should be in fucking heaven, fucking spiritual jail, where you can't go into another body and relive another life for at least 10 years. Like that's some crazy ass work. But you know, it's another sunny day and shit. I got a lot of white tees. Don't get on me. You gotta stay stacked up on white tees. Washington weird, man. One moment they sunny, one moment they rainy. You feel me? Washington weird. But man, it's my nigga day, man. R.P. Jody. I'm my nigga. I'm my nigga. I really miss that nigga, man. I really miss that nigga. Yeah. That's how we doing it. That's how we doing it. That's how we doing it. Yeah.
In today's episode, we go over some of the most bizarre fatal animal encounters of all time. From a man fatally attacked by a kangaroo, a dog who shoots his owner during a hunting trip, to a killer cow who takes the life of an innocent girl. These are some of the most unusual animal attacks you will ever hear. Welcome to Final Affliction. Australia is well known for many things, least of all its kangaroos. Estimated to be around 50 million living on the mainland, these unique macropods rarely cause any trouble for people. But that's not to say that they are harmless creatures. They possess powerful weapons to ward off any threats, including sharp teeth and claws, and powerful back legs that can deliver fatal blows. There are 4 different species of kangaroo: the red kangaroo, eastern gray kangaroo, western gray kangaroo, and the antilopine kangaroo. The largest is the red kangaroo, which can grow to 2 meters, 6 feet tall, with an extra 3 feet of tail. They can weigh up to 90 kilograms or 200 pounds. They are certainly not an animal you would want to get into a fight with. Sometimes males consider humans as a threat, largely because of our posture. Standing upright on 2 legs and facing a male kangaroo can be seen as a challenge. Thankfully, it is rare for kangaroos to lash out at people, but when they do, the results can be devastating. Kangaroos do not seem to cope well in captivity. They need the freedom to roam and can display behavioral difficulties when confined to wildlife parks or small enclosures. As such, a permit is required to keep them, and these are not given out lightly. But for one Australian resident, keeping a western grey kangaroo as a pet was done so without knowledge from local authorities. His name was Peter Eads, who was an animal lover and well known in the area for his flock of 60 alpacas. He was dedicated to his animals, establishing the Agonis alpaca stud in...
Look at loving them wildlife animals. Got his ass. Got him. Got him a permanent bed. Uh-huh. He was old, but he could have still been here. You feel me? He could have still been here. But the path that he chose, was not the path for him. You mean?
1997, he knew every alpaca individually, giving every single one of them a name. But when he stumbled upon an orphaned Joey kangaroo, there was no way he was going to turn his back on it. He nursed the Joey back to health, and raised him on his alpaca farm for 3 years. Despite tending to the kangaroo's every need, one day the kangaroo would turn on Peter. Nobody knows exactly what happened on that fateful day in September 2020.
He said, "Nigga, you left me for 3 years. You left me for 3 years. Nigga, I was locked up for 3 years. You told me you was gonna come back for me."
22.
He was
But the
off
Western
there.
Gray Joey was now fully grown. He had reached sexual maturity, and it was breeding season. With testosterone high, the kangaroo was full of natural aggression and an instinctive need to assert his dominance. When Peter came out to the paddock to feed the alpacas, the kangaroo bounded over to him. It now stood at 1.3 meters, 4 feet 3 inches tall, and weighed just over 50 kilograms, or 120 pounds. Peter looked down at it and went to stroke it on the head affectionately, but instead of being greeted by the usual chirpy, cuddly-looking pet he had known for years, the kangaroo lashed out at him. Initially, it boxed him, striking Peter with its front legs. Peter backed away briefly as the kangaroo continued to lash out, its claws slicing through Peter's skin. Then it came in for the big hit. It launched itself into the air, and then using its muscular tail to balance on, it fired its 2 powerful back legs at Peter. The strike was so unexpected that Peter stumbled backwards and fell to the ground. Although the kangaroo's opponent was down, it didn't stop there. Peter was still in what it considered to be its territory.
Nah. Your ass should have gotten in the fetal position. I would have gotten in the fetal position. I would have. Stop, please, stop! My leg! Hey, that's a wild ass animal. I would have. Mommy! 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 Yeah, what?
It continued to kick the 77-year-old, delivering deadly blows to Peter's head. Each time he tried to get to his feet, he was knocked back down. His head was cut and bleeding. It was pounding, and Peter felt it swirling before blacking out. He lay on the ground inside the alpaca paddock with the kangaroo standing over him. It wasn't until hours later that a member of
the kangaroo was like this. I wish you would get up. I wish you would get up. I wish you would get up.
his family called by. There was no answer from Peter inside his home. But when they walked to the back of the house, they spotted Peter lying on the ground and rushed towards him. He was unresponsive, and they immediately called the emergency services. When paramedics arrived, they raced to save Peter, but the kangaroo wouldn't let them near the fallen man. It rushed at them, threatening to deliver its fatal blows to them as well. They could see that Peter was still alive. His chest was still rising and falling. They were so close to helping him, but the kangaroo blocked their path. They needed backup. Police officers were dispatched to the location and shot the kangaroo. Only then could paramedics reach Peter, but by then it was too late. He had succumbed to his injuries and was unable to be revived. The attack was the first fatality caused by a kangaroo since 1936 and shook the southern town of Redmond in Western Australia. The care and devotion Peter had shown to his animals had taken a tragic turn. He had once stated that when he died, he wanted to be buried next to the grave of his favorite alpaca, Claudia.
This game, you're not ready for it.
On April 3, 2016, farm workers in Swinhoe Farm in the UK's Northumberland.
Hold on, before we get to that, man. Hey, if y'all ever travel to Australia or wherever there is a kangaroo, y'all spot a kangaroo, stay away from that motherfucker. Y'all do not got hands like that. That motherfucker will really do you in. That motherfucker will really do you in. That is a wild animal, and they is trained to. They not even trained to kill. They instinct is to kill. Like, he was standing over that boy. Like, leave wildlife animals alone, period. Like, leave them motherfuckers alone.
were turning out their herd of cattle from two large wintering shed onto pasture. It was a procedure they did in the springtime every single year. And up until now, the turnout had gone without a single incident. But all that was about to change. The beef cattle were excitable after being in the sheds all winter. They bucked and they kicked as they were released onto the yard. This time of year was always a joy to see the animals free to roam after being cooped up for the long, dark winter months. 62-year-old farmer Alistair Nixon climbed onto his quad bike and rode out of the yard and along the bridleway ahead of the herd. He positioned the bike so that it blocked the path, directing the cows through an open gate and into the field. The other farm staff ushered the cows out of the yard, waving their arms and shouting to encourage the animals to move along. The clattering of hooves over the concrete could be heard as the excitable cattle trotted out of the yard. As the 140 cows began to make their way along the bridleway, pushing and shoving one another, they came across Alistair on his quad bike and diverted into the field. They frolicked on the grass and ran to the far reaches of the field. But a group of 7 or 8 cows with 5 or 6 calves managed to squeeze past Alistair's quad bike. They went trotting along the public bridleway and over the brow of the hill. Alistair continued to hold his position until the rest of the herd was safely in the field. When the gate was securely fastened, he turned his quad bike around and went to gather the escaped cows. But what he found over the brow of the hill was a sight that shook him to the core. Something terrible had happened. Staying at the farm's holiday cottages was 61-year-old Marion Claude and her family. She was a primary school teacher from Greater Manchester, and they had all decided to spend the Easter holidays out in the Northumbrian countryside. That day, at about 3 p.m., they were off on an enjoyable afternoon walk. With Marion were her young grandchildren. It was great to be able to spend time together as a family, but ahead of them, along the bridleway, danger was coming. They suddenly saw the excitable cattle appear from over the brow of the hill. The path was narrow with barbed wire fences either side. The family could see that this was a disaster heading straight for them. With nowhere to turn or hide, everyone tried to jump over the barbed wire. The young children dived through the fencing, but Marion never made it. The thundering hooves were upon her. The enormous beef cattle, weighing in excess of half a ton, galloped forwards. Shoulder to shoulder, they were like an impenetrable wall charging at her. Marion glanced around. There was a large wooden gate that she backed up against, pressing herself into the wooden frame to try and escape the stampede. But one of the cows ran straight into her. Its head was down low, its wide, square forehead rock hard and solid, which had shoved into the grandmother in front of her horrified family. She gasped. The air was forced from her lungs as the cow hit her. She crumpled forwards, and the cow struck her again and again. It was like a scene from a horror movie, and her family was powerless to stop it. Eventually, the headbutting cow hit Marion so hard that she was sent flying up and over the wooden gate, landing with a heavy thud on the other side. Moments later, Alistair appeared over the hill, the sounds of the family screaming for help just below. Marion was rushed to hospital, where she fought bravely, but the damage had been done. She passed away 3 days later from her injuries, leaving a family traumatized and bereft. The company that owned the farm were fined £72,500 and made changes to their farming practices, such as erecting warning signs about cattle and moving the herd out onto pasture in smaller numbers. But no amount of money or changes would ever bring back Marion, a beloved mother, grandmother, and primary school teacher. In the U.S., between 40 and 50 people are killed by dogs every year, and around 4.5 million people...
I do not play with dogs. Nigga, I was just chased by dogs. I must start hearing heat at work. What are you talking about?
People are bitten by them. But this next story was a very unique tragedy. Joseph Austin Smith from Wichita was the life and soul of any party. He was 32 years old and worked as a plumber with Brown's Plumbing Services. He always lit up the room when he arrived for work each morning, making his colleagues laugh uncontrollably at something silly he might have said. As well as his job, Joseph also enjoyed playing the guitar and the great outdoors. On January 21st, 2023, Joseph and his friend headed out on a hunting trip. They loaded up the pickup truck and drove through the rural countryside of Sumner County in Kansas. It is regarded as one of the top 3 states for pheasant and quail hunting, with 300,000 acres of public land to enjoy, as well as more than 1 million acres of privately owned land, which is open seasonally to hunters. Deer hunting is also popular in the state, which is what Joe and his friend intended on doing that day. In the back seat of the pickup truck was Joe's friend's dog, a large German shepherd that followed him everywhere. Joe knew the dog well. It was their trusty sidekick, who always accompanied them on their adventures. But something was about to go horribly wrong. The 2 men and the dog headed for Gita Springs, just north of the Oklahoma border, where they planned on hunting doe. They had made an early start to make the most of the Saturday, but perhaps in their haste to hit the road, they carelessly threw their equipment into the back of the vehicle's cab, including the hunting rifle. The dog dutifully leapt up onto the back seats, panting as it looked out of the window as the car rolled along. But the 2 men had made a fatal error. They reserved the trunk for any does they managed to secure, and the rifle that was in the cab with them was not only loaded, but the safety catch wasn't on. As the car bumped and bounded along the tar roads, the dog shuffled about in the back seat, leaning on the loaded gun. Joe and his friend were unaware of the imminent danger as they chatted amongst themselves. At 9:40 that morning, when they were about 45 miles south of Wichita, the dog's paw pressed down on the rifle's trigger. The full weight of the animal was enough to fire the weapon. There was an ear-splitting crack inside the car. The rifle had unexpectedly gone off in the back seat. The dog leapt backwards at the deafening sound, and Joe's friend immediately hit the brakes. The pickup truck screeched to a halt. His ears were ringing, and he looked over at Joe in question with his eyes wide. But Joe didn't respond. He was slouched forwards in the passenger seat. His friend grabbed him, shaking him slightly and shouting his name. But Joe didn't say anything. Looking down at Joe's body, blood seeped through his shirt, and his friend knew that he had been hit. He immediately dialed 911, and the emergency crews arrived within minutes. Blood poured from Joe's abdomen. The bullet had blown through the back of Joe's seat and hit him directly in the back, severing an artery and causing a massive and uncontrolled bleed. Despite the rapid response from paramedics and attempts at CPR, Joe died at the scene. His friend and the dog were unharmed in the incident. It was a complete shock for all that knew Joe and a terrible accident, but it was also one which could have been completely avoided had basic gun care been followed. A very similar incident to Joe's happened in Turkey, when another man's dog accidentally stepped on the trigger of his gun and shot him dead. Sumner County sheriffs arrived at the scene to investigate the tragedy. It was clear that the men were on a hunting trip and that Joe's friend was innocent in all of it. In response to the incident, Kansas's Wellington Fire and EMS Chief Tim Hay said, "Keep the safety on. Unload your guns completely when it's in a vehicle and put it away in the trunk."
Hey man, these some crazy ass stories, some wild ass stories that happen to some real people, and that is so sad. You feel me? It really is. But I hope everybody can watch this and learn from this if they feel like they want to go do these things as like an adventure or something. You feel me? Just take it and learn from it. That's what I hope. But if you made it this far, like, comment, share, and hit that sub button. I'm gonna catch you in the next video game.